You're listening to the PR Wind Down Podcast, the show for public relations professionals who are ready to see real change in the PR industry. We are your hosts, April White and Laura Schooler. Let's get ready to wind down. Huzzah! Laura.
Hi.
How the hell are you?
I'm okay. I'm busy. I'm feeling like you. I have so many unread emails. I'm going to have to set aside. I usually am able to read this stuff during the day, but I'm not.
You suddenly are welcome to my world. Like in my head, it's like, cool, I'm just going to only do meetings in the morning. But in what world is that ever going to work?
I know. Well, I had at least 5 or 6 meetings today. So everything that I read every day to keep up with what's going on in the world and in PR has not happened today. Realized
But you want to know what's happening with Elon Musk.
That's one that I have not missed.
I had a feeling not. All right. So small talk is over. Things I should have been trained on.
Let's do big talk.
Big talk.
KISS BTO. That's things I should have been trained on. Yes, let's do that.
So today, things I should have been trained on, we're going to chat about how to communicate with your teams as a senior leader. So Reagan in their roundup had included this article from Smart Brief about how leadership language can drive employees nuts, which is pretty interesting. And so in it, it talks about, being proactive in your language and using language to reduce workplace toxicity. So let's just start off before we go straight into the article, since we're supposed to provide our own thoughts here.
Well, as we said, few people are trained on anything, so we can start from that. Well,
exactly, that basic assumption.
I feel like I decided at a point in my life that I am going to combine the uber professional things that you sort of hear in passing with my own, personality and communicate with, junior people who are up and coming from a place of putting myself in their shoes and trying to remember what it was like and what I probably didn't know at that point in my life.
Right. Yeah, which can be harder to do the older you get and the further along you are in your career, depending on the level of seniority of the person, right? Like if it's somebody that was like, is where you just came from, it's a lot easier. But if it's somebody that's at the very beginning of their career and you're like, 20 years ago, what would I have thought?
Right. I tried to put in perspective for people that when I started, I was faxing press releases so that they don't even know what that is, right? So that they just understand that there's a big chasm, technologically speaking, but I'm pretty good at getting up to speed in that regard as much as I need to pretty quick for an old broad. But I really do think just letting people know that you're there goes a long way. And that's one of the things that I communicate as a foundational aspect as a senior person.
Yeah, agreed. I think the point you're making is having empathy of how you would have wanted to be treated. I mean, it goes back to the golden rule, right? Nobody wants to be talked to aggressively, rudely, in a way that's terrorizing, in a way that's, scary, in a way that's intimidating or disrespectful or, any of those things. So it's easy to pick up on doing those things when that's how you've been treated. But then I think the challenge as somebody trying to do it better is to not do it the way it was done to you and to do it the way you would have wanted it done if, you could have had your way back in the day. So in this article, it's interesting. She has, don't use controlling language, for example, that tends to erode somebody's psychological need for choice and connection and competence. She says, so for example, your deadline's next week, you must do whatever it takes and push harder to finish this on time. And then in a second version where she uses non-controlling language, which helps people reach their own conclusions and feel like in control of their destiny and feel like they're in the driver's seat. She has, your deadline is next week. If you're feeling pressure or concerned you might not make it, let's explore some solutions to help you meet expectations and relieve the source of your tension, which is obviously the way I would want to be treated instead of your deadline is next week. Do whatever it takes to push harder to finish on time, right? It's like,
do it. I had
It
I worked
reminds
for
me of
a
that
company.
horror story of, like, the guy that was mad at the agency where somebody had COVID, and
Oh, right.
he's like, "Sick is like COVID's for quitters," or like, I don't
Right,
know, like, whatever it
right.
was.
We don't
Sorry.
sick is a four-letter word in my book, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a boss once that would, like, walk around the office every morning. Have I already told maybe I've told you this, and he would go, big day,
Oh god.
big day," like, just, like, through the whole office for a
Oh
good, like, 10
god.
minutes. Yeah.
I worked for a guy once who it wasn't me, it was the guy that I worked for directly. They, like, went to, I think, London for a meeting, and they left at, 11 at night because that's, New York to London, and so they had to work all day, Monday, let's say it was, then go to the airport directly from work, get on the flight, and land at whatever it is, 7:30 in the morning, and go directly to the meeting and work all day, and then get
Yeah.
back on the plane the next night and go to work. And he didn't literally work in 2 different countries for 3
Oh.
days straight, and he was like, "Sleeping is for losers."
Yeah, and I mean, I think in general, it's a fine line between checking in with people, making sure they have the resources they need, that they're feeling confident in what they're doing, that they feel clear in the assignment, and breathing down their neck and making them feel like, there's no wiggle room for mistake to the point where they're going to be scared.
Right.
We had a all agency retreat recently, and we had somebody with the Myers-Briggs training come in and talk about, and depending on a certain kind of personality, there
Mhm.
are people that are very methodical in their deadline driven process, and so they're like, start to finish, they work on it a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And for those people, it is okay to check in and say, hey, how are things going? Then there's another style of person that essentially, and I'm one of these, as is our producer Veronica. The creative process is a little bit more fluid, let's say. And so you don't necessarily, you think about it and you might think about it again and you might work on it a little bit and then put some lines in the sand and then think about it some more. And then, like, right before the deadline, it's kind of like, ta-da. And
Right.
for those people, it can feel like if you interrupt them or ask them how it's going in the middle of that process, it can be to them like the equivalent of opening the oven while they're baking a souffle,
Right. And
and it like crushes the whole process. And so it is also important to know the personality type of the person you're managing and
right.
whether or
I
not
could see that as
checking in
like,
with them
what
is
what
like
do
the
you
right
like
thing to
think that
do,
I'm not
or
doing it? Like almost like you're getting yelled at before you're like ready to like show the final product.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, the other thing that I think that people who, like you just gave the example of different styles of working, getting from
Mm.
point A to point Z, I think that, and I don't know how many different types of people there are, but I assume that some of those types probably don't interact well with other of those types because I think of these things like, okay, you need to talk to them this way. In my mind, like the direct, like, I need you to do this, and this by this, and this. Where is it?
Mm.
Like, and that's not me yelling at people, but I think people
All
probably take it
caps.
that way, right? It's just like
Probably.
it's just like I'm somebody who's like, let's get it done, let's get it done early, let's get it done now, because like if you don't get stuff done today, you have no idea what mountain of stuff might crush you tomorrow. Like keep it
I
moving,
mean, you're
keep moving,
definitely on
keep
the other
moving.
side of you're not the souffle person.
Yeah, right. So because
You're
that
the
is
other, like,
like
plotting, methodical, like,
like
a
a
little
million
bit.
things could happen if you're like,
Yeah.
woo, but I have a little bit of a hard time when I think that I have communicated, and I'll even start something for people, like start writing something for people and give
Mm.
them specific directions, and they don't take them or do it. And I just am like, wait, I like basically did it for you. How did what I almost did for you turn out to be completely wrong? So I've had those troubles, I will admit. So I was not communicating the right way with those particular kinds of people.
Well,
And I
I mean,
really don't know
obviously,
how to.
right? It's like, yeah. I mean, it's
I,
at the end of the day, it's a two-way thing, like any relationship. And so it can't be all that person's fault.
right.
And I think also if we have the same problem over and over with multiple people that we're managing, then it's
Right, you're the common denominator
probably us.
too.
Yeah, you're the common denominator. So it's like probably coming from you. But, in that case, then why not ask? Like, "Hey, how are you finding it when I give you assignments? Do you feel
Right.
clear on them? Do you feel clear on deadlines? Is there something I can do better to make it clear? Is there a way in which you'd like to get the assignment that would
Yeah.
be easier for you?" And I even had within our team, I had a situation where it was like, "Okay, I think the way you're assigning this isn't working for this other person." And it
Right.
was like, "How about you ask them, like, how do you want to receive the assignments, or how would it be helpful?" That kind of thing, right? And then it ends up being better all around because everybody's
And did it work?
communicating. Yeah, I think so. It seemed to.
Yeah. I have a
Yeah.
hard time. I don't know why. I shouldn't. It's not that weird, but to stop and say, "Hey, how would you like to receive this information?" For two reasons. One is whatever. I have
You don't care.
issues.
Just kidding.
No, no, or whatever my issues that I'm working through. And nobody
I
ever
mean, we
asked
all are.
me, right? Nobody, I didn't learn that way. Nobody ever asked me
But
how I
but
wanted
you
to
would have
do
liked
anything.
it. You would have liked it though.
Right. But but I'm so old that I didn't realize that that was even an option.
Right.
So it's
To
part my
manage up.
personality not want to admit it, and it's part my
Yeah.
personality that it was never even presented to me as an option. So I've
Right.
got a deep hole to dig out of to just be with people who don't sort of work on the same, way as me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just ask them because I guess I don't believe that it actually works.
Ooh.
But now we need
Try
my
it.
shrink to come in.
I think you should try it and report back. I like that idea. And you can tell us if it worked. And then we can tell the listeners who weren't trained on it that it works, if it works.
Right.
And if it
And now
doesn't, it
we've
doesn't.
trained them. Right.
And now we trained them. Ha ta-da. Okay. Well, on that note, I have both of our guests in the waiting room and I'm going to let them in. So, November is Veteran and Military Families Month. And for this episode, we have a special double guest situation, co guest situation with the co host. And we are chatting with two of our own trust relations team members who are both wives of service members. So Briana Cusimano is a senior account executive whose husband serves in the Army. And Veronica Yip is our integrated marketing communications manager and podcast producer. And she also is married to a man who serves in the US Navy. And so we're very excited today to have them here to discuss how military life and being the wife of somebody in the service has impacted their careers, and share advice with other military spouses who might want to continue on a similar linear career path in communications. So welcome both of you. Very excited to have you and excited to chat with you about, how this has been a journey for you, especially pre-pandemic, where I know remote work was not such a thing, but I'm curious how it's shifted to since remote work has become more common.
I'm an advocate for having your own career and, doing your own thing, especially with, being married to someone who's in the service. But there is times where you kind of have to put their career first, and being remote, there's more of a flexibility where, for
Mm.
instance, my husband, he was training for about like 3 months, and on his way home from that training, he actually got a call that he was being deployed that same day. So, he had nothing with him. He needed to pack his bags, be on base by a certain time. And that's kind of where I had to jump in right in the middle of my workday.
Mm,
So, dropping everything that I needed to do, letting my team members know, hey, this is happening right now. Need to, help my husband in the most way possible by just like packing his bags.
yeah,
And being remote has allowed me, it would be a different story if I was actually in an office being
had to
actually.
go, yeah,
Yeah,
drive home
exactly.
and then do it and
So
then drive back, or yeah.
exactly. So it also gives me the opportunity to kind of, help him out in those times of need as well.
Was it scary for you guys early on, feeling like, okay, I want to pursue my career, but how am I going to do it with this person that I'm married to suddenly being, whisked away to Alabama, or like taken off to, another state, or maybe there's like, a situation where we have to go overseas, or, how has that impacted your ability to think about what you want for yourselves career wise?
I think for me, even in the interview process, it made things really stressful because there's a lot
Mm,
no matter what an employer says about hiring people who are family members of service people, particularly spouses, or children, probably. I don't have the experience of being the child of somebody who's active duty, but I'd imagine it's a similar
Mhm.
experience where it still puts that thing in that hiring manager's head that you might not be around for very long. And it makes it really difficult to have to explain, I want to be here. I'm going to do the best I can while I'm here. But like, yeah, it is possible that I find out next month we have to go to Japan and there's nothing I can do about it. So I found,
Yeah,
yeah. So I found that the
yeah,
interview process was stressful in that
Mhm.
way. And then it's
for
kind of
sure.
a thing too, where like, when do you introduce that to an employer if you do get the job and if they're going to be receptive to it or not? Because you had to get the job first. You need, you have your own ambitions. You need to obviously pay your bills. Like, all of these things are a factor. So
Right.
it's this added level of pressure that you feel like you can't be honest about this huge part of your life.
Mm.
And at a certain point, you kind of need to bring it to the table. And that's really difficult as a junior person in a competitive career field like
Mm.
public relations and marketing, because there's somebody else like waiting right there to take that job that you're trying to get. And that's something that can really hurt you. At least in my experience, that's how I felt.
Right. Yeah.
It almost sounds like interviewing for a job when you're pregnant.
I was just thinking that. Like,
Yeah,
when do I tell them that I'm pregnant?
Yeah.
yeah.
When do I tell them I'm gonna have to take off 2 months and
3
8
months, 4
months,
months, who
3
knows,
months?
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
for
okay,
me,
I'm the maternity leave queen, I decided. I might even put it on LinkedIn, but go on.
Oh, that's your new specialty?
I
Like,
might
call
be, I
me in
might.
when your chicks get pregnant, because I don't have kids.
love that.
It's good positioning.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a real niche.
I had a pretty challenging time when Brandon had, made the decision that he was going to enlist. I
Yeah.
was, in the middle of my career working in New York City and, at the point where I was growing within the company that I was actually at that time. So there was kind of a conversation I need to have internally where I didn't want to choose one over the other. I was going to find a solution. I wanted to continue obviously working with the company that I was at and obviously still stay committed to my relationship as well. And this was probably pre-COVID where working remotely still wasn't the norm yet. Well, I had
Mm.
the opportunity to work remotely because of being sick or because there was some sort of emergency. It was still pretty frowned upon. But internally, I knew that I can do the job. And I knew it was possible
Mm.
to get everything that I needed to have done without actually being physically in the office. So at that time, I had proposed, being remote. I had to actually make a plan of what it was going to look like for me to be completely remote in a completely different state, making sure that the person who I was reporting to, along with the person who was below me, they were actually on board and comfortable with the idea. And ultimately, I was allowed to work remotely, but it came with a little bit of a catch. And that was me taking a pay cut and actually going through a 60-day trial.
To
And
see if it
again, like I had
works?
mentioned, I had already been at this company for 2+ years. So I had thought that I had shown my
More
Proven
than
worth.
proven
yourself.
yourself.
And how long did that last?
So it lasted for a few months and then COVID actually hit. So with COVID hitting, it was no question that I would be the first one to be laid off. Yeah,
Because you were remote?
because I was
Oh
remote.
my god, I
Oh
wasn't
my
going
god, and they're, like,
there.
discriminating against you. This is,
Yeah,
like,
no,
horrible.
it was really, really disappointing at that time, and it was such a scary.
I hate this.
Yeah, it was a scary period for me
It's
because
so weird because it's such a non-starter now, but
yeah,
wow.
it was sad and it was really scary and, obviously along with so many other people who were
Right.
experiencing layoffs and, being let go from their jobs, just the added pressure of also having to think about like my husband potentially leaving and, having to pick up at
Of
any
course, oh my
moment of
god. No, and
time.
you're, like, left all by yourself for
Yeah,
whatever chunk of time until
yeah,
he returns at whatever unknown date,
yeah,
and then
And
on
now
top
with
of
no
it, you've
job
got
or
this works.
income.
Oh my
Right.
god.
exactly. And now
I hate
having
this
That
for
and
you.
it also added pressure to him because, he has to pick up if he has like I said, if he has to leave, from one moment to next, that's exactly what he needs to do. But now having to add that like added pressure of being the sole, person bringing any sort of income
Yeah.
into our household was also, a scary thing for him as well. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
that isn't taken into consideration when some companies are, deciding
Mhm.
on laying people off.
Yeah, that's how it was when we got orders to San Diego. It took me 8 months to find a job there. He was the only one making income. He was on a round the world deployment. There's no phone calls. Like, you're only
Yeah.
getting an email maybe every 2 weeks. So it was this horrible thing where it was like, hey, haven't talked to you in 2 weeks. Ship is fine. Have you gotten a job yet? And I was like, nope, but I'm going to keep trying because you have to literally pick up, go
Yeah.
to some place where you have no connections, you don't know anybody, you've never worked here before, and just try to find a job. And it is
Right.
extra pressure on them. And it puts a lot on you too. Like, am I giving up this thing that's important to me and
Hmm.
it's out of my hands? And that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds rough.
It sounds
Well,
like
right, no,
being
and
a
we didn't even
baseball wife.
I mean, no, and I know Veronica and I've talked about this before, even at the retreat, like, every time they move, then it's a new set of friends. So it's like
Mhm.
you have to make a new social life wherever you
Right.
go. So in addition to that, plus temporarily lending them
Lending.
to active duty, and then on top of that, you got to find a job and hope that they don't fire you because you're I mean, that's some crazy.
So now, though, that you work for trust relations, if you get moved, you're not in fear of
Yeah.
losing work. I
No,
guess,
we literally don't care.
We
nor
have moved here at Trust. I think
right.
Yep.
both of us have moved.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've
I've
been,
moved
No,
twice.
and the irony of all of this is that I'm not just saying this for the sake of saying it, but both Veronica and Briana are two of the absolute most reliable, most superstar, employees that we have. And so the funny thing is, for other people to think, oh, and they might not be reliable or
Right.
whatever. It's like they're the complete opposite.
Right.
And for a while, it's like, how do we only hire military spouses?
Ah,
Do that? Like, because they're
because they're used to
amazing.
like
Well,
working
and
like with no floor underneath them,
here's
probably.
the thing. How independent and self-sufficient do you have to be a military spouse? So in terms of remote work, they're like the ideal persona because I mean,
They're
how
already doing
strong
it.
of an individual do you have to
Mm.
be to lend your spouse to the to the service, right? Like how like that's next level independence and sort of self-sufficiency, I
Yeah,
think.
and it makes it more important to have your own identity and your own goals and ambitions, right? Because like even when that
Sure.
partner is home, 1 to 2 nights a week, my husband doesn't come home from work at all, and that's a normal week when he's not
When he's
deployed, right? Yeah, and holidays, like sometimes he works on Thanksgiving and that's it. I'm alone on Thanksgiving, right? Like there's so much inherent isolation in it from just like the way that the lifestyle works that you have to have your own things that you care about. And for me, like a career is part of that. Like I have to have my own thing that I'm working toward myself, independent
mm,
of the whirlwind of a life that you live when you're married to
mhm.
somebody who's in the military. But it does take a lot, and it's hard to like move someplace and have absolutely nobody and just kind of have to figure it out. But it also
Mm.
makes that, to me, that like linear career component more important because things that
And
are
it's like
important.
your only consistent thing because the location's
Yeah.
not the I mean,
yep.
friends are yes, but in-person friends no.
Yep.
And then the relationship isn't I mean, it's yes, it's
But they're
an,
here, then they're not. It's not
but they're
like
right,
nine to
exactly. It's
five
not
every
the
day.
same
Yeah.
kind of relationship, right? Like the dynamics of the relationship are changing constantly, even if the
Yeah.
relationship itself is steady. Well, anything else for other military spouses who are in communications careers, like anything you've learned that you could impart to them as a sort of, words of wisdom?
I would just say hold out for the job that's a fit for you. Like, I understand sometimes you have to take a job for financial reasons or so you don't have a big gap in your resume, and that's fine. But don't stop searching for and applying to jobs that align with what you need. You
Mm,
have to be thinking about what's fulfilling to you, what kind of flexibility you need. Don't sell yourself short on going for the job that's actually going to fit the lifestyle, because if you keep pursuing that and then you find something that fits, the stress level reduces a great deal. So even if you have to take a job that isn't a fit and keep applying, or incrementally take jobs that have more things that fit over time as you're able to get them,
Mm,
fine. But it is a huge mental load off if you can find the right environment and the right that'll give you the flexibility you need and still allow you to pursue a career path that's fulfilling to you.
mm.
Because I really did not think that that situation existed, and ultimately it did. You can find it. It's just you got to keep trying.
Yeah, just keep looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, with marketing and PR specifically, it's funny because I kind of always like relate the being a spouse, a military spouse, and being in PR and in that industry in the space. They're both kind of similar where, you're kind of you don't know what's going to happen. No 2 days are the same. So I think,
Mm.
if you're a military spouse and interested in getting into the PR space, you're already built for this. You already know that you can kind of handle this. But and then also exactly what Veronica had said is, definitely being independent and, going after what you want. It is kind of hard to separate your own life because you kind of have to also be on the go and pick up when they do. But doing what you love as well, because there are going to be so many times where you might be alone, or you might not have them to lean on as much as like
Mm.
you would hope for. Just pursuing something that you love kind of keeps your mind off of that, and keeps you kind of going for yourself as well.
Yep,
Yeah. I would
that's great
say
advice.
too, letting go of the expectation that your career path is going to look the same as someone else in marketing and PR. And you might have to take different stepping stones to get to the place that you want to go, without having the luxury of maybe living in a big city and working at a small firm and making a connection and moving to a bigger firm in the same city, or those sorts of things that might happen in a typical lifestyle. That's okay. You just have to find the footholds that work for you, because it is a competitive industry. And especially starting out, I was like, how am I ever going to do what these successful communications people are doing if I can't go about it in the same way? And there's other ways to do it. And that's fine, because you can still find success by following a different trajectory to get there.
So Brianna also has some exciting news, and that in addition to being a military spouse, she is now an expecting military spouse. And I am curious, if there's an intersection between your career path with the remote needs of a military spouse, plus now, being an expecting mother.
Yeah.
So then you have the baby in addition to having a
And so now I'm
baby
adding more to
coming.
my plate as if,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's just being pregnant and, like you said, having a spouse who, you don't know when they're going to leave or when they're going to be home. I kind of add this pressure to myself where I just have to have my life structured. But in all reality,
Mm,
being remote and having such a reliable team really makes it so easy. So,
mm.
working with trust and knowing the type of team members that I have around me, it's more support than anything else. And there really doesn't have to be any worry if you're working with the right team in the right company. And thankfully, like I do have that system around me here at the company.
Yeah. And we really do embrace the, not just remote work lifestyle, but also the whatever works for you in terms of the structure of your workday. So we have people that, for example, like to work earlier and be done at 3, and it doesn't matter as long as there's enough crossover with their teams and things are sorted out. So it's also the kind of advantage of working with a company like ours. That makes a lot of sense, that it does add another dimension of like the need for flexibility with your work life schedule.
A lot of these situations can be stressful themselves, and I think
Mm,
sometimes it's an added like scare for people to even bring those situations up because they
mm.
might have team members or someone within the company who's like, well, I don't
I
understand why
had that
you.
happen.
Yeah,
Did
it's
you? What happened?
Yeah. I virtually never control when I need to take PTO. It's always around like the ship schedule. They don't tell you when a homecoming is usually for a ship, because it's a secret
I
until the
remember
last
this.
minute. And sometimes you're not allowed to tell 10 people oh yeah, my husband leaves for deployment on this day because it is literally a secret. So I
Yeah.
took off with HR. It was like butted up to a holiday weekend. I made a plan. I emailed all of my managers as in advance as I could and said I had to take in a personal day. And I went through all of the things I was supposed to go through. And then the week before, I was pretty junior, but I still made a hand locked list of all my tasks with like little updates. And I went to a particular senior manager and was like, hey, I just wanted to share, my like reminder that I'm going to be out. And before I even got the rest of it out, like just flipped out, like, when were you going to tell me this? Like, when were you going to let me know? Like, what could you possibly have? Like, we need you here. We don't have enough coverage. Just like, da 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 da. It was already approved by HR. And like, I couldn't even control it. I did everything I could to do it the right way and do it responsibly. And it was horrifying. And I was so afraid
Right.
after that. Every time something came up, I was like, I
Oh,
don't know if they'll let me take off. I don't know if they'll let me take off. I'm so sorry. I don't know if they'll let me
oh,
take off. And then you might be like missing your spouse's last day at home or their first day back or like these things that are
right. And they've been gone for
pretty
8 months, and
important.
it's like you finally get to say
Yeah.
hi to them, and you're like, sorry, I gotta work because that we need coverage.
I'm like, that's pretty
Oh,
extreme, but you have just as much of yourself to give as another employee, whether you need to like shift your day around
of
a little bit
course.
or not. But I think you have to be a pretty dedicated person to commit to the military lifestyle in any capacity. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I can't imagine a world where you would just let everything drop
No,
and go
the
ignore
the
it and
the
do something else.
loyalty, that's exactly it, right? Like the loyalty that you guys have to a spouse that's doing that, and then, the amount that you're wanting to support them in what they're doing, even if it causes you a lot of heartache, complications, challenges, right? You're always putting them first to a certain degree, and the kind of person that does that is, can you imagine, a better employee, right? Because that shows the loyalty that they're going to put into the company. So I think for people to be discriminatory towards people like that makes me angry. But it's their loss, and they should all come work for us. So anything else that you guys would like to add as a takeaway for other military spouses? Anything we didn't cover off on that you want to chime in with? But this has
Yeah,
been
I
really
think just like
interesting.
keep trying. Just keep trying. There's always a better alternative than you think there is. And I think we can both attest, like when you find that, it's a big relief and it's worth it. So just keep trying.
Yeah.
It's like finding the one, right? Like finding the right, like, make your list of your, relationship wants or whatever, and somebody do the same thing for the
Yeah.
job. Like, I want the job to be this, and then keep
Yeah.
looking. Cool. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. This has been really interesting. And I think as a key takeaway, the character that you guys have as military spouses is definitely something I really admire. And I would just say to you guys and anyone else who's a military spouse, embrace that, right? Because the kind of person you are, by the fact and the nature of what you're doing as a spouse is, it just demonstrates your loyalty, your independence, and your sort of selflessness, right? And I think that for that reason, don't ever be ashamed of it. Don't ever look at it as something that people might look down on. If they do, then don't take it personally, because that's reflection of them and not you. Because you guys are amazing, and both of you are incredible employees. So very,
Thank you.
very pleased to have you both.
I'm very hormonal right now. Don't make me cry.
All right. Well, with that, should we let you go so you can can go shed some tears?
Oh my god. All right. Well, thank you guys for having us both on.
Of
I
course.
Yeah,
love
thank
talking
you.
about this stuff.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure.
Well, so what I learned from our interview
Mm,
with our military spouses, to tell you the truth, is I think that everybody should approach their lives and their careers in the same way
mm.
Veronica and Bree does, in that you should always keep looking for what fits your life the best and not
Yeah.
be beaten down by the man.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
so we got 2 more segments.
Let's do it. Horror story and news. What do you want to do first?
I think the horror story, and you have to read it.
I do? Okay. Okay, I have it. All right. So here is the horror story of the day. Hi, Laura and April. I have this client who's asking what, to me, seems to be the impossible. This client has a tech solution. It's pretty cool for private use. It's a software security system that's designed to help people set up surveillance on large properties. They have a lot of clients who are celebrities that require large scale security and are considered high risk. We don't have any problems getting them coverage in tech and security trades. There's a lot of opportunity to newsjack on their behalf, and they pay a higher retainer. Here's the issue. Founder is obsessed with comparing her product to, quote, military grade security and surveillance and insists that we pitch her to military publications.
Oh, God.
No matter, oh my God, no matter how much success we generate with other trades, she sees it as a failure if we aren't able to get her military placements. I feel foolish reaching out to pubs that work with actual military leaders to imply that this startup has anything remotely comparable to a military grade software solution. Multiple question marks. We usually get crickets from those pubs, and I did relay the rare feedback that they only want to talk to actual military experts. Client just gets her ego bruise, says she's, quote, an expert on the military, unquote, and doubles down. She has no formal military connection aside from briefly attending a pre-college military school. When she was a teen, I looked it up, and it was a boarding school for, quote, out of control kids. And then we have even suggested they hire someone who is former military, but they have trouble doing so because their product isn't as military grade as they like to say it is. I don't know how to tell her the hard and obvious truth that nothing this new software can do is remotely in the same league as what top secret military surveillance can do. LOL. But she's asking for the moon. How do I manage expectations here without crushing this lady's fantasy?
Oh,
Oh boy, is right. Oh my God. And it's like so appropriate for Veterans Day. Obviously, we saved this one back for
I
this
had a
moment.
client a million years ago who was like some sort of tech startup. I don't even really remember. And they said to us, why can't you get us? And this was many years ago, so this publication mattered. Why can't you get us on the cover of Time magazine? Bill Gates is on the cover of Time magazine. Like, why
Right.
can't we get
Are
on
you
the
Bill
cover?
Gates?
I mean, literally, like they're like, this guy Bill Gates is on Time. Why can't you get us on? So I
This is
equate
like,
that to sort of what's going on here. Like just
oh my
no
God.
recognition of like rational reality, how the media works, anything.
This
I
is
don't know
like
what you do with that.
this is like a recurring nightmare I have, but the nightmare is slightly different than this one. And it's real life. It's not in my dreams. This happens to me all the time where I have a client who says, "Hey, we have a round of funding that we want to get in TechCrunch." Cool. How much? 3 million, 5 million. And I say, "That's not going to happen." And then they say, "But look at all these examples of companies who have done $3 million raises who have been TechCrunch. Why can't you do it for us?" And then they send me hyperlinks to said articles in TechCrunch. And then I say, the problem is that those have really interesting stories, or I can't say this, they're actually disruptive and like inventing something
Or their
that's going to
founder is
change
a known,
the industry, or
right?
their founder is famous, or, and
Right. The reason that story is
or
there is not because of the raise number.
3
It's
million.
because of
Yeah.
everything else. You have
But
neither.
then you're basically saying to them, but what you have is not news. So, and it's just, it happens over. It's like I can't get out of this loop of having the same conversation. And it's always a certain kind of client who's like very, very pushy and, tends to just want whatever they want and want to dismiss reality.
Right.
And so this is definitely, this is definitely a theme that I'm sure you've seen as well with clients that are just not wanting to. It's like one time we had a client that Lana, our chief client officer, had to actually say to them, "We can want a lot of things, but that doesn't change what the press wants." And she literally had to basically say, like, what you want isn't realistic. And we can want that, but that doesn't make it possible.
Right. It doesn't change how the
Does
media
doesn't
functions.
change the media landscape or how they function.
Right.
She said it obviously very nicely, but I mean, how often do we have to have that conversation? And it's awkward because you're basically trying to pop somebody's bubble about their myopic impression of how great they and or their company are, which is rough. It's like putting a pin in their ego, like,
Well, I guess though what you said, what Lana said is what may have to happen here.
oh, of course, that's definitely what has to. I mean, it sounds like this person has already done it, but maybe they need to do it either with more authority or pull in somebody that will be listened to and deemed as having
Right.
more authority. Because that's the other problem is I sometimes have team members who tell the client something, and then you have to pull in Lana or you have to pull in me at some point
Right.
and say, hey, so what you want isn't going to happen, and this is why. And it could be that I'm saying exactly the same thing as the junior person said, but they won't listen to anybody but
Falls on
me.
deaf ears. Yeah.
And so I have to go, yeah, I have to go repeat the same. Well, the team has tried everything they can. They're doing XYZ. Like, there's nothing that we can do to change the feedback
Well,
we're
like for
getting.
this, like you have to get a military client, and they said they already told them they should get a ex-military employee. You have to literally get something that is formally military, not just that you went to military school because you were a bad kid when you were
Yeah,
fourth year.
because you were a bad kid when you were 14.
Like you need to
Oh my
have
God. I'm
some
dead.
sort of military technology or military clients or military, yeah.
Right, or it has to be that the person that worked on, so I do have another incoming client that, the person that developed the tech worked in the CIA and has that actual expertise to
Right.
say, okay, therefore we're bringing the CIA technology into what we're doing. That works because he was in the CIA, but you can't
Oh,
just say
yeah. And one
military
other thing
grade
you
or
can do,
whatever. Yeah.
sorry, one other thing you can do is ask this client, why do you want to be in the military? What is your goal in being in military trades? And if they say, well, because I want the people who read them to consider buying our service, you could say to them, well, there are other ways of getting in the publication. Maybe there's advertising or sponsorship or events or
Mm,
something. And maybe that's how you get
mm.
them off the earned media thing and onto something else, and explain to them how much more easy and definite and you can control the message. So maybe that's what they
Yeah.
should. How's that?
Yeah. I like it. I think it's
All
a mic
right.
drop. Should we move on to news?
Sure.
Okay, so our news of the day is about CNN employees bracing for layoffs after the network chief warned of quote unsettling changes ahead. Wow, what a ominous foreshadowing here. Unsettling quote period is the lead of this story in CNN Business, which is interesting. They're reporting on themselves. So basically, the CNN staffers had an email at 1 p.m. on Wednesday when the network boss, Chris Licht, informed them that sweeping changes are imminent. In other words, brace for layoffs by the end of the year. And he noted there's widespread concern over the global economic outlook and said that we, quote, must factor that risk into our long term planning. And then he said all this together will mean noticeable changes to this organization, and that by definition, that's unsettling. These changes will not be easy because they will affect people, budgets, and projects. He said the ad market will plummet in a recession and rating declines aren't helping. So they're just trying to get more lean. I mean, this is happening across the board, right? Like we're seeing all kinds of Google's even been in the same, okay, we're going to tighten our belt around holiday celebrations, etc.
So, I
This
mean,
is pretty interesting. What do you think?
is there a difference between, layoffs at a media company and layoffs at a tech company or layoffs at agencies? Or is this just potentially going to be happening because we're going in recession, probably? Although there's been a lot of competing information about that, still it's the economy and inflation and all that is not following the
It's
usual
debated.
trajectory,
Yeah.
and that There's still more jobs open than there are people to fill them, and employment is low. But what I think that I did read that might be coming is that job openings listed are declining. So where there was 8 million job openings, now there's, 5 million job openings. So the
Mm,
openings are shrinking, but there's still a lot of openings out there.
right.
Where in, I don't know, the early 70s or mid 70s, there was, millions of people and no jobs to be had. Now there's millions of people and even more millions of jobs. And is it that
Mm,
people don't have the right skills for those jobs? People just don't want to work because they're lazy? Is it people don't want to work those jobs because they, can't stand working for the man anymore? Or
mm.
does it not pay enough, etc. So it's a different dynamic, I think, than it used to be.
Well,
So
and the question too is like how much of this is just an excuse to get leaner where you need to anyway and get rid of
right,
company bloat. So it's like, okay, let's just trim the fat and use the economy as an excuse because everyone else is.
right, right,
Is it
because
that?
right,
And or is and I don't know how much of the recession talk is politically motivated either with the midterms just having happened.
right, totally. I mean, inflation is real. Well, and
Yeah,
today,
there's no debating that.
today, New York City finally put into effect the law that you have to put a salary range on your job openings. So that will
Mm,
be interesting to see how that plays out. So I don't know if it's going to impact anything, but the reason for doing it on the one side is so that people who are typically underpaid,
mm,
women, people of color, etc., other types of, groups will hopefully not spend the rest of their lives being behind in terms of pay. All these different facts, phenomenon, trends that never existed before, ever, I don't think, in at least American economic society. So I don't know that there's any that you can say, oh, well, this is what usually happens, or this is what happened before. I don't think that all of that stuff applies. Now, if you dig into this, the language of business leaders annoys employees. These are the certain types of words or language that companies use when they're basically heading towards pushing you out the door. Are all of these things ways of communicating with employees? Those things are all out the window too. The head of CNN is saying that these things will be coming in the beginning of 2023. And
mm,
in this article, it says that the memo serves as a reminder that the fear of the unknown is worse than the bad news when it comes to
mm.
change communications, and emphasizes the
That
importance,
is true.
right, and emphasizes the importance of going beyond words when putting people first by not leaving them in the dark. So by saying, oh, we're going to have these big changes and things are going to be different and you may or may not have a job in a few months.
No, it's terrible communications.
um,
Terrible because it's just leaving all this ambiguity and then that breeds insecurity because people don't know what's happening and then they fill everything in with rumors. I actually just had a chat with a client about this and it was like, okay, anytime there's a significant change like this, it's better to lead with more information than less. And so, we had a client in the past that basically wanted to not talk about whether it was a merger or an acquisition because they didn't want to create concern and they just wanted to call it a union. And I was like, if you do that, then people are going to automatically fill in the blank and think there's something you're hiding and there's a
yeah,
reason for it
yeah,
because they just want to know the bare bone. Like, what does this mean? Is it a merger? Is it an acquisition? If it's one or the other, what does this mean for the brand? What does this mean for my job? What does this mean for where our offices are based, where we work? What does this mean for like the future of the company? And usually, if you provide all the information, yes, they might still be nervous, but they'll be less nervous and there'll be less gossip than if it's like, what's happening? What's going to happen next? And I actually lived through this because I
right.
lived through M&A activity at eMusic and then ended up, as one of the middle managers because everyone that was a middle manager got let go. And I was the director of PR communications. So I helped facilitate all the communications and then only to find out I was one of the people getting let go.
You watch your own plank.
Hmm. I did.
So,
Didn't
so
know it. I thought I was safe because they were
they
keeping
had
me
you
on
doing
to
it.
handle. Yeah.
They didn't care.
But it was difficult because they didn't want to tell people what was happening, and then what was happening behind the scenes was everyone was whispering like, who's next? Who's next? Who's got fired? Am I gonna get fired?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
they're in the bathroom, like whispering together, trying to figure it out. And it's like way better to do something more transparent
Right.
to cut down on the space that you're giving to people to make assumptions and
Yeah.
fill in the blanks with their own narrative, because then it becomes a rumor mill disaster.
Right. And then it unravels
Everyone
the
is
strategy you had. Yeah.
for sure.
So
Yep.
I think that the theme that ties all of these things together,
Mm.
almost all of them, is the importance of internal communications at companies about any that they say change management issues. And remember, anything that is communicated internally goes externally in half a second.
Hmm.
So you have to look at it from the point of view of communicating it internally, and what will it look like if it goes external? And pay us for giving
Yeah.
you
Okay. Well, should we wrap it up and get our close?
Sure.
Cool. So thank you everyone for tuning in for the PR Wind Down podcast.
And thank you to Briana and Veronica for today's military wives interview.
We'd also like to extend a special thank you to our veterans and military families today and every day. And thank you by extension for your service and for your spouse's service. We're, very supportive of the military and service members and their families.
My dad's a veteran, but he never saw any action. He was never deployed.
Really?
He was too old for Vietnam and too young for Korea, so he was in between. Anyway, but he
Aw.
just realized like a year and a half ago that he could like use his veteran status for a lot of benefits that he never used before, like
And so
getting
he
free
started
stuff.
using them?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's
Nice.
also 1,000 years old, so he could get stuff because he's old. But
1,000.
now he's got the
So
double vet, but he never
funny.
did it before. But anyway,
So remember to submit your own agency stories and questions and to share with your friends and colleagues. If you subscribe and leave us a rating, it will help us reach new listeners like you.
and if you have an anonymous PR horror story of your own, please send it our way at the contact email below the episode notes.
We can't wait to wind down with you again next time.
I'm your host, Laura Schooler.
I'm your other host, April White.
Um,
We never say that.
do you really like sitting there listening to like big intros on podcasts? It's the worst.
So we're just going back at everything we said, and we're just breaking the rules today.
They got dressed
I
up
am
for
not-
the podcast.
I'm not ready.
Meanwhile,
I'm not
I'm
ready
wearing
for
a
this.
t-shirt like Schneider on One Day at a Time, and my rainbow John McEnroe sweatband.
I did see that you had the 80s like sweatband, the rainbow sweatband. Where are you? Do you have high top white sneakers on too?
No, but here.
Oh my god, let's see. Yes, girl, yes, Pumas.
And they even have little gold tips on the shoelaces, and they say, "Hold on, I got to turn around." I don't know if you can see it. They say New York. They're like total like New York.
Oh my god, I love it.
Yankees, like, yeah. So now that I've bent myself into it,
I love it.
pretzels.
Okay.
And that was it. And I didn't take time off, and I didn't get sick, and I didn't do much else except work. I will say that it helped me to have better skin as an older person because I hadn't seen the sun for 25 years, though. That's the benefit.
Ageless.
Right. I have Botox face without any Botox.
Ooh, I like that.
And that's also if you eat ice cream and pizza a lot.